The little girl had been standing outside the rest stop for 18 hours when John Turner's black Escalade pulled into the parking lot. She didn't know that, of course. Didn't know the gas station attendant had called the police twice, or that the state troopers had checked on her 4 times, and each time she'd hidden behind the dumpster until they left. Didn't know the temperature had dropped to 14 degrees, or that her lips were turning blue beneath the scarf wrapped 3 times around her small face. All she knew was that her daddy had told her to wait, and she was still waiting. John cut the engine and sat in the darkness, watching the child through the windshield. She was small, maybe 7, 8 years old, wearing a puffy pink coat that had seen better days and clutching a backpack to her chest like it contained the last precious thing in the world. Her breath came out in small clouds. She kept glancing toward the highway, then back at the rest stop entrance, a repetitive loop of hope and disappointment that made something uncomfortable twist in John's chest. He'd stopped for gas. That's all. 5 minutes, then back on the road to Boston. The girl's head turned toward his SUV. Even from 30 feet away, in the amber wash of the parking lot lights, John could see her eyes, huge, dark, exhausted. She stared at his vehicle for a long moment, and John found himself unable to look away. Then she started walking toward him. "Shit," John muttered, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun in his shoulder holster. He didn't draw it. She was a child, for Christ's sake. But every instinct honed over 20 years in the life screamed that this was wrong. Kids didn't approach strange men in SUVs at 2 a.m. Not unless something was very, very broken. She stopped 3 feet from his driver's side window and knocked. 3 small taps, painfully polite. John lowered the window halfway. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of snow and something else. Unwashed hair, fear, desperation. "Mister?" Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying or screaming. Are you the man my daddy told me about?" John's entire body went still. "What?" He said. She clutched the backpack tighter. He said if something happened, if he didn't come back, I should find the man in the black suit who never smiles. He said you're dangerous, but you don't hurt kids. Her chin trembled. "Daddy left me here and never came back. Are you the man he told me about?" Every alarm bell in John's head was ringing now. He scanned the parking lot, empty except for 2 18-wheelers near the truck stop and a sedan at the far pump. No one watching. No setup he could detect. He looked back at the girl. She was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. "How long have you been out here?" "Since yesterday morning." She said it so simply, like it was normal. "Daddy said wait by the bathrooms. He went to make a phone call and didn't come back. 18 hours, alone, in December." John's jaw clenched so hard he felt his molars grind. "What's your name?" "Beth." She swayed slightly, and John realized she was barely standing. "Beth Crawford. My daddy's name is Marcus. Do you know him?" Marcus Crawford. The name hit John like a fist to the sternum. He did know that name, not personally, but professionally. Marcus Crawford was Antonio Rivera's accountant, the man who'd been skimming evidence for the FBI for 6 months before Rivera found out. The man who'd disappeared 3 days ago, along with a ledger that could put Rivera away for life. The man who was, almost certainly, already dead. And he'd sent his daughter to find John Turner, the most feared man in the Northeast. A Mafia boss with a reputation for brutality that made grown men cross themselves. Why? "Get in the car," John heard himself say. Beth's eyes widened. "Really? You're going to freeze to death out here." He unlocked the doors. "Get in. Now." She scrambled into the passenger seat, and the backpack slid from her grip, hitting the floor with a heavy thud that made John's eyes narrow. That bag weighed at least 10 pounds. What the hell was she carrying? Beth didn't seem to notice his scrutiny. She was too busy pressing her hands against the heating vents, small sounds of relief escaping her throat as warmth flooded the vehicle. John reached into the back seat and grabbed his coat, a black cashmere overcoat worth more than most people's monthly rent. He draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her whole. "Thank you," she whispered. John pulled out of the rest stop and onto the highway, heading toward the city. He needed to think, needed to figure out what the hell Marcus Crawford had gotten him into. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Beth's stomach answered for her, growling so loudly it echoed in the quiet car. "Yesterday morning," she said. "Daddy bought me a muffin before he left." 24 hours. No food. No water except what she might have drunk from the bathroom sink. John's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Marcus Crawford was a dead man. But if he weren't already, John might have killed him himself for leaving a child like this. "There's a diner 10 miles up," John said. "You'll eat there." Beth nodded. Then her hand crept toward the backpack at her feet. She pulled it into her lap, holding it the way other children held teddy bears. "What's in the bag?" John asked, keeping his tone neutral. Beth's face shuddered. For the first time since getting in the car, she looked wary. "Daddy said don't tell anyone. He said it's really, really important. I'm not going to take it from you. Daddy said people would want to. He said they'd hurt me for it." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He said you wouldn't, that you'd keep me safe." John's chest tightened. Marcus Crawford had trusted him, a man he'd never met, with his daughter's life. Why? What made an accountant working for Rivera think that John Turner, of all people, would protect a child? Unless Marcus knew something John didn't. "I'm taking you somewhere safe," John said. "Then we'll figure out what to do." Beth nodded, her eyelids already drooping. The warmth of the car, the motion of the highway, the sheer exhaustion of 18 hours of terror. It was pulling her under. "You can sleep," John said quietly. "I've got you." She was asleep before he finished the sentence, her head tilted. Against the window, the backpack still clutched in her small hands. John drove in silence, his mind racing. He should call his consigliere, Marco. Should take the girl to a safe house and let someone else deal with this. Should absolutely not be driving a dead man's daughter to his own estate in the middle of the night. But he kept driving, because Beth had asked him a question that burrowed under his skin like a splinter. "Are you the man my daddy told me about?" And for the first time in 20 years, John Turner wanted the answer to be yes. He pulled into the diner parking lot 30 minutes later. Beth stirred as he cut the engine, blinking up at him with those huge, solemn eyes. "Come on," John said, climbing out. "You need to eat." The diner was nearly empty, just a trucker in the corner booth, and a waitress who looked like she'd been on her feet for 12 hours. She glanced up as they entered, her gaze moving from John's expensive suit to Beth's ratty coat, and her expression softened. "Just the two of you, honey?" she asked. "Yes," John said, steering Beth toward a booth in the back, away from windows. They slid into the cracked vinyl seats. Beth kept the backpack next to her, one hand always touching it. John ordered coffee. Beth ordered pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, orange juice, and hot chocolate. The waitress's eyebrows rose, but she didn't comment. When the food came, Beth ate like she'd been starving. Because she had been. John watched her demolish the pancakes in silence, something dark and furious building in his chest. Marcus Crawford had done this to her. Had put her in danger, abandoned her, sent her to a stranger with nothing but a prayer that the stranger would be kind. It was reckless, desperate, stupid. It was also, John realized, the act of a father who had run out of options and chose to trust a monster over certain death. Beth, John said quietly, waiting until she looked up from her eggs. I need you to tell me something, and I need you to be honest, okay? She nodded, chewing slowly. Did your daddy tell you anything else? About why you needed to find me? About what's in that bag? Beth swallowed. Her hand tightened on the backpack strap. He said there are bad men looking for it. He said they'd kill him if they found him. Her voice cracked. He said if anything happened to him, you'd protect me. He said you have a rule about kids. John's blood ran cold. What rule? That you don't let them get hurt. Beth's eyes filled with tears. Daddy said you'd understand. That something bad happened to you when you were little, and you made a promise. John couldn't breathe. How the hell did Marcus Crawford know about Sarah? About the sister John had lost to the system when he was 12 years old, the night their mother died and no one came to help. That secret was buried deep. Only 2 people in the world knew the full story, and neither of them would have talked, which meant Marcus had dug hard. Please don't send me away, Beth whispered. I don't have anywhere else to go. John looked at her. This small, terrified child who'd been standing in the freezing cold for 18 hours because her father told her to trust a man she'd never met. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made the day they took her away, screaming his name. I'll never let it happen again. I'll never let another child suffer if I can stop it. I'm not sending you away, John said, and the words felt like signing a contract in blood. You're staying with me until we figure this out. Beth's face crumpled with relief. She started crying. Silent, shaking sobs that made the waitress glance over with concern. John did something he hadn't done in 2 decades. He reached across the table and took the child's hand. You're safe now, he said. I promise. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered, You just started a war. John's estate sat 40 minutes outside Boston, a sprawling colonial hidden behind iron gates and 12-foot stone walls. He'd bought it 10 years ago, mostly for the privacy, partly because the previous owner had owed him a considerable debt. It was excessive for a man who lived alone, but John had never cared about excess. He cared about control, about having space where no one could reach him unless he allowed it. Now, pulling up the long driveway with a sleeping 8-year-old in his passenger seat, the house looked different. Colder. Emptier. He parked in the circular drive and killed the engine. Beth stirred, blinking awake. Where are we? She asked, her voice small. My home. John climbed out and came around to her side, opening the door. You'll stay here until we figure out what to do next. Beth slid down from the seat, still clutching the backpack. She stared up at the house, all Georgian columns and mullioned windows, and her mouth fell open slightly. It's really big, she whispered. It's secure, John corrected. He placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the front door. No one gets in unless I say so. The moment they stepped inside, warmth enveloped them. John had left the heat on, and the house smelled faintly of the cedar logs he'd burned in the fireplace 2 nights ago. Beth stood in the marble foyer, slowly turning in a circle to take it all in. The curved staircase, the chandelier, the oil paintings that cost more than most people's cars. Are you rich? She asked, with the blunt honesty of a child. Yes. My daddy said rich people are usually mean. John's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Your daddy was smart. He led her through the house to the kitchen, a massive space of granite and stainless steel that he barely used. Most nights, John ate takeout at his desk or didn't eat at all. Cooking required domesticity, and domesticity required a life he didn't have. Sit, he said, nodding toward one of the bar stools at the island. Beth climbed up, setting the backpack on the counter, beside her. John filled a glass with water and slid it across to her. She drank it in 3 long gulps. "When did you last sleep?" he asked. "I don't know." She rubbed her eyes. "Daddy and I were driving for a long time before he stopped. I slept in the car. You'll sleep here tonight, in a real bed." John glanced at the clock on the microwave, 4:47 a.m. "For a few hours at least." Beth nodded, but she didn't look relieved. She looked tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop. John understood that feeling intimately. "I need to make some calls," he said. "Figure out what happened to your father. But first, I need to know what's in that bag." Beth's arms wrapped around the backpack protectively. "Daddy said—" "I know what your daddy said. But if I'm going to protect you, I need to know what I'm protecting you from." John kept his voice level, non-threatening. "I'm not going to take it. I just need to see." For a long moment, Beth didn't move. Then, slowly, she unzipped the bag and pulled out a black leather notebook. John took it, flipping it open. His expression didn't change, but his pulse spiked. Ledgers, transaction records, names, dates, amounts, offshore accounts, shell corporations, payoffs to judges, cops, politicians. Everything Antonio Rivera had done for the past 5 years, laid out in meticulous detail. This wasn't just evidence. This was a nuclear bomb. "Your father kept this?" John asked quietly. "He said Mr. Rivera is a bad man, that he hurts people." Beth's voice shook. "Daddy was trying to stop him. He said the police needed proof." Marcus Crawford had been cooperating with the FBI, and when Rivera found out, Marcus ran, but not before giving his daughter the one thing that could destroy Rivera completely. It was brilliant and suicidal in equal measure. "Did your father tell you anything else?" John asked. "About where he was going? About who he was meeting?" Beth shook her head. "He just said to wait, that someone would come." Her eyes filled with tears again. "He's not coming back, is he?" John could have lied, should have lied, but something about the way Beth looked at him, like she'd had enough of lies to last a lifetime, made him tell the truth. "Probably not," he said. Beth's face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, accepting it with the resignation of a child who'd already survived too much. "Come on," John said, closing the notebook and tucking it under his arm. "You need sleep." He led her upstairs to one of the guest rooms, a space he'd never used, decorated in soft blues and creams by an interior designer he'd hired and never met. Beth stood in the doorway, staring at the queen-sized bed with its down comforter and mountain of pillows. "This is for me?" she asked. "Yes." "The whole bed?" John frowned. "You've never had your own bed?" "We moved a lot. Sometimes we stayed in motels. Sometimes we slept in the car." Beth set her backpack on the floor, finally letting it go. "Daddy always gave me the bed, and he slept on the floor." Something in John's chest cracked. He turned away, heading for the attached bathroom. "There are towels if you want to shower. Clean clothes in the dresser. They'll be too big, but they're better than what you're wearing." He paused at the door. "Lock this after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except me." "Okay." Beth climbed onto the bed, sinking into the softness with a small sound of relief. "Mister?" John looked back. "Thank you for not leaving me at the rest stop." John's throat tightened. He nodded once and left, pulling the door shut behind him. In the hallway, he stood in silence, the notebook heavy in his hands. He should call Marco. Should get the family lawyers involved, figure out how to hand Beth over to social services without implicating himself. should absolutely not be harboring the daughter of Rivera's missing accountant in his own home. But he thought about Sarah, about the group home they'd sent her to, where she'd lasted 3 months before running away, about the years he'd spent searching for her, finding nothing but dead ends and cold trails, about the promise he'd made in the dark. Never again. "Damn it," John muttered. He went downstairs to his study, poured 2 fingers of whiskey, and made the call. Marco answered on the second ring. "It's 5 a.m, John. Someone better be dead." "Marcus Crawford," John said. "Find him, or find out what happened to him." A pause. "Rivera's accountant?" "Yes." "Why do we care?" "Because his 8-year-old daughter is sleeping in my guest room." The silence on the other end lasted 5 full seconds. "You're joking," Marco finally said. "I'm not." "John, what the hell did you do?" "I found her abandoned at a rest stop. She had nowhere else to go." John drained the whiskey. "Crawford sent her to me, told her to find the man in the black suit who doesn't hurt kids. So he knows about Sarah, apparently." Marco swore in Italian. "This is bad, John. If Rivera finds out you're sheltering Crawford's kid, let him find out." John's voice went cold. "I made a rule 20 years ago. I'm not breaking it now. And if Rivera comes for her, then he'll learn why people cross the street when they see me coming." Marco sighed. "I'll find out what I can about Crawford. But John, you need to think about this. Really think. Taking in this girl means going to war with Rivera. Are you prepared for that?" John looked at the notebook on his desk, at the evidence that could destroy Antonio Rivera completely. "Find Crawford," he said, and hung up. He sat in the darkness of his study, listening to the house settle around him. Upstairs, Beth was probably already asleep, safe for the first time in days. And John Turner, the man who'd spent 2 decades building walls so high nothing could touch him, felt those walls begin to crack. 3 hours later, John woke to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. He was out of his chair and in the hallway in seconds, hand on the gun he'd placed on the desk. But it was just Beth, barefoot, and drowning in one of his old t-shirts, padding down the stairs with her backpack clutched to her chest. She froze when she saw him. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "I wasn't sleeping." John lowered the gun, setting it on the hall table. "What's wrong?" "I'm hungry." She said it like a confession. "And I had a bad dream." John glanced at the clock, 9:23 a.m. He'd been asleep in his chair for maybe 2 hours. "Come on," he said. In the kitchen, John opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents. Leftover Chinese food, half a 6-pack of beer, and condiments. Not exactly child-friendly. "I'll order groceries," he muttered. "I can make toast," Beth offered. "If you have bread." He did. She toasted 2 slices while John made coffee, and they sat across from each other at the island in silence. "What was the dream about?" John asked. Beth picked at her toast. "Daddy. He was calling for me, but I couldn't find him." She looked up. "Do you think he's scared? Wherever he is?" John thought about the kind of men Rivera employed, about what they did to people who betrayed them. "I don't know," he said, which was kinder than the truth. Beth nodded, accepting it. "My daddy wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. But he loved me." Her voice wavered. "He told me every day. Then he was smarter than most men I know." They finished breakfast in quiet. Beth washed her plate in the sink, an automatic gesture that spoke of a childhood spent helping, contributing, making herself useful so she wouldn't be a burden. John watched her and thought, she's already learned to make herself small. "Beth," he said, "while you're here, You don't have to clean up after yourself. You don't have to be useful. You just have to be a kid." She looked at him, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means you can leave your plate in the sink. You can watch TV. You can make a mess." He paused. "You can just exist without earning it." Beth's eyes filled with tears for the third time in 12 hours. "Okay," she whispered. John's phone buzzed. Marco. He stepped into the hallway to answer. "What did you find?" "Marcus Crawford is dead," Marco said bluntly. "Body turned up in the harbor this morning, weighted down, but the current brought him up anyway." John's jaw clenched. "How long?" "Coroner estimates 3 days. Rivera's people got to him right after he ran." So Beth had been waiting at that rest stop for a dead man. For 18 hours, she'd believed her father was coming back. "There's more," Marco said. "Rivera's got people asking questions. Lots of questions about Crawford's kid. He knows Marcus had a daughter, and he knows she's got something he wants. The notebook. He won't find her," John said. "John, listen to me. You need to hand her over to the FBI. Let them put her in witness protection." "No." The word came out harder than John intended. "She's not going into the system." "Then, what's your plan? Keep her locked in your house forever?" "If that's what it takes." Marco was quiet for a moment. "You're really doing this." "I'm really doing this." "Then you better be ready. Because Rivera won't stop until he gets that ledger back. And if he finds out you're the one keeping it from him." Marco trailed off. "You're starting a war you might not win." "Let me worry about that," John said, and ended the call. When he returned to the kitchen, Beth was standing at the window, staring out at the snow-covered grounds. "Is my daddy dead?" she asked, not turning around. John could have asked how she knew, could have deflected. But Beth deserved the truth. "Yes," he said. She nodded slowly. "I thought so." Her breath fogged the glass. "He told me once that if the bad men ever found him, I shouldn't be sad. He said he'd made his choices and he'd do it all again to keep me safe." "He loved you very much," John said quietly. "I know." Beth turned to face him, and her expression was far too old for 8 years. "What happens to me now?" John crossed the kitchen and knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. "You stay here, with me, until I figure out how to keep you safe permanently. What if they come for me? They won't get past me. But what if they do?" John held her gaze. "Then I'll make sure they regret it." Beth studied his face for a long moment, and then, slowly, hesitantly, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. John went rigid. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him, couldn't remember the last time he'd allowed it. But then Beth whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me alone." And John's arms came up, carefully, awkwardly, holding her with the gentleness of a man who'd forgotten how. "You're not alone anymore," he said. And in that moment, John Turner made a second promise, one that would change everything. "I'll keep you safe, even if it costs me everything." The first week passed in a strange, tentative rhythm. John hired a security detail, 4 of his most trusted men, rotating shifts around the estate. He installed new cameras, reinforced the gates, and personally checked every entrance twice a day. The house became a fortress. Beth became a ghost inside it. She was quiet, too quiet. She'd wake at dawn, make her bed with military precision, and sit in the kitchen waiting for permission to eat. She never asked for anything, never complained. She moved through the massive house like she was trying not to take up space, and it made something inside John's chest ache. On the 3rd day, He found her sitting on the floor of the library, surrounded by books she'd carefully pulled from the shelves and stacked in neat piles. "What are you doing?" he asked. Beth jumped. "I'm sorry. I'll put them back." "I didn't say put them back. I asked what you're doing." "Organizing." She gestured to the piles. "By color first, then by size. It makes them prettier." John looked at the hundreds of books he'd never read, arranged by an interior designer he'd never met, now being reorganized by an 8-year-old with a system that made absolutely no sense. "Okay," he said. Beth blinked. "Really?" "It's your house too. Do what you want." She stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. John left her to it. That night, he worked in his study while Beth ate dinner at the kitchen island. Marco had sent over files on Rivera's operation, places he owned, people he'd bought, patterns in his movements. John was looking for weaknesses, pressure points, anything he could use. Because Marcus Crawford had been right about one thing. Antonio Rivera was a bad man, and bad men didn't stop until someone made them. "Mister?" John looked up. Beth stood in the doorway, holding a plate with a sandwich on it. "I made you food," she said. "You didn't eat." "I'm not hungry." Daddy always said that too, but he still needed to eat. She set the plate on his desk, next to the gun he'd left there. "Ham and cheese. I found it in the fridge." John looked at the sandwich, slightly crooked, with too much mustard and the crust cut off. It was the most domestic thing that had happened in this house in 10 years. "Thank you," he said. Beth nodded and turned to leave, but John stopped her. "Beth, you don't have to take care of me." "I know." She looked back at him. "But you're taking care of me, so it's fair." She left before he could respond. John stared at the sandwich for a long moment. Then he ate it, even though the bread was stale and the mustard too sharp, because a child had made it for him, and somehow that mattered. The breakthrough came on day 5, in the form of a phone call. John was reviewing security footage when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Yes." "Mr. Turner?" A woman's voice, soft but steady. "My name is Cynthia Ramos. I'm a trauma nurse at Boston General. I need to speak with you about Beth Crawford." John's blood went cold. "How do you know that name?" "Because 3 years ago, I treated her father in the ER after someone beat him half to death." Cynthia paused. "And because 2 days ago, I saw you bring a little girl into the hospital for a checkup. I recognized Marcus's eyes." John's mind raced. He'd taken Beth to the hospital under a false name, paid the doctor in cash to keep it off the books. Someone had talked. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice ice. "To help her." Cynthia's voice didn't waver. "I know who you are, Mr. Turner. I know what you do. And I know Antonio Rivera is looking for that little girl. If this is blackmail, it's not." She took a breath. 3 years ago, Antonio Rivera's men burned down my house because my ex-husband owed them money. My daughter was inside. She was 6 years old. John went still. "Her name was Sophia," Cynthia continued, and her voice finally cracked. "I was at the hospital, working a double shift because we needed the money. I wasn't there to save her." A long pause. "I've spent every day since then wishing I could go back. Wishing I could have done something. Anything." "I'm sorry for your loss," John said carefully. "But I don't see what that has to do with—" "I saw Beth in that hospital," Cynthia cut him off. "I saw the way she looked at you. The way she held onto your hand like you were the only solid thing in her world. And I saw the way you looked at her when you thought no one was watching." Her voice softened. You care about her. Maybe more than you're ready to admit. John said nothing. I can help, Cynthia said. I know how to take care of traumatized children. I know the signs of PTSD, night terrors, regression. And more than that, I know Antonio Rivera's operation. I know his schedules, his properties, his people. My ex-husband worked for him before. She trailed off. Before everything. Why are you telling me this? Because for 3 years, I've been looking for a way to make Rivera pay for what he did to my daughter. And now I have one. Cynthia's voice hardened. That little girl has something Rivera wants. And you're the only person in this city with the power to keep her safe. So let me help you. Let me do for her what I couldn't do for Sophia. John was quiet for a long moment, weighing risks, calculating angles. Tomorrow, he finally said. 2 p.m. I'll send a car. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, John said and hung up. He sat in, the darkness of his study, thinking about dead children and the parents who survived them. Thinking about promises made and promises broken. Thinking about the war that was coming, whether he was ready or not. Cynthia Ramos arrived exactly at 2 p.m. the next day. John watched from the window as she stepped out of the car, a woman in her mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, wearing scrubs under a winter coat. She moved with the efficiency of someone used to crisis, but her eyes were haunted in a way John recognized. Grief, the kind that never really left. He met her at the door. Ms. Ramos. Mr. Turner. She extended a hand. Her grip was firm, steady, a nurse's handshake. Thank you for seeing me. John led her through the house to the kitchen, where Beth sat at the island doing a puzzle. The girl looked up when they entered, her expression immediately wary. Beth, John said. This is Cynthia. She's a nurse. She wants to help. Beth's eyes narrowed. Help how? Cynthia knelt down, bringing herself to Beth's level. I heard about your dad, she said gently. I'm so sorry. Beth's face shuddered. I'm fine. It's okay if you're not fine. Cynthia's voice was soft but firm. It's okay to be sad, or angry, or scared. I'm not scared. But Beth's hands were shaking. I lost my daughter 3 years ago, Cynthia said quietly. Her name was Sophia. She was 6. And for a long time I told everyone I was fine too. She paused. But I wasn't. And pretending didn't make it hurt. Less. It just made me lonelier. Beth's eyes filled with tears. Did it stop hurting? No. Cynthia reached out slowly, giving Beth time to pull away. When she didn't, Cynthia took her hand. But it got easier to carry, especially when I let people help. Beth looked at John. He nodded once. Okay, Beth whispered. Over the next hour, Cynthia talked with Beth about normal things. Favorite foods, favorite colors, what she liked to read. She didn't push, didn't pry. Just created space for Beth to be a child instead of a survivor. John watched from across the room, arms folded, assessing. Cynthia was good, natural. She knew how to talk to traumatized kids without making them feel fragile. When Beth finally went upstairs to her room, Cynthia turned to John. She's holding it together, Cynthia said. But barely. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the need to be useful, those are textbook trauma responses. Can you help her? I can try. But she needs stability, routine, and most importantly, she needs to know she's safe. Cynthia met his eyes. Can you give her that? Yes. Even if Rivera comes. Especially then. Cynthia nodded slowly. Then I'll help. Whatever you need. I need information, John said. Everything you know about Rivera's operation, his properties, his schedules, his weaknesses. I can get you that. Cynthia pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. My ex-husband kept records. Receipts, ledgers, meeting notes. I've been collecting them for 3 years, waiting for the right moment. She looked up. This is that moment. John took the phone, scanning the images. It was good intelligence. Detailed. Current. Why didn't you go to the police? He asked. Because the police can't touch Rivera. He owns half of them. Cynthia's voice hardened. But you can. You're the only one in this city with the power to make him bleed. John handed the phone back. If you do this, there's no going back. Rivera will find out you helped me. He'll come. For you. Let him. Cynthia's eyes were cold. I've been waiting 3 years for him to give me a reason to destroy him. Now I have one. John studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Welcome to the war, he said. Cynthia shook it. I've been at war since the day he killed my daughter. This is just the first time I've had an army. That night, after Cynthia left, John found Beth in the library again. She'd finished organizing the books by color and had moved on to arranging the decorative objects on the shelves. Cynthia's nice, Beth said without looking up. She smells like hospitals, but the good kind. The kind that makes you feel safe. She's going to come by a few times a week, John said, to check on you. Make sure you're okay. Are you okay? Beth asked. The question caught John off guard. What? You look tired. And sad. She finally turned to face him. Cynthia said it's okay to be sad. Are you sad about something? John thought about Sarah. About the 20 years he'd spent looking for her. Finding nothing. About the guilt that lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. Sometimes, he admitted. Beth walked over and took his hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his like a lifeline. Cynthia said having people helps, she said. So you have me, and I have you. So maybe we'll both be less sad. John looked down at her. This child who'd lost everything and was still trying to make him feel better. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe we will. That night, for the first time in 20 years, John Turner didn't dream about his sister. He dreamed about a little girl with a backpack, standing in the snow, asking, "Are you the man my daddy told me about?" And in the dream, he finally had an answer. Yes. The nightmares started on day 8. John woke to the sound of screaming, high-pitched, terrified, the kind that burrowed into your chest and squeezed. He was out of bed and in the hallway in seconds, gun in hand, every instinct screaming. Threat. But there was no threat, just Beth, sitting up in bed, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. John hesitated in the doorway. He knew how to handle enemies. Knew how to read a room for danger, calculate exits, neutralize threats. He had no idea how to handle a crying child. But Beth saw him, and her small hand reached out. "Please don't leave," she gasped between sobs. "Please don't leave me alone." John set the gun on the dresser and crossed to the bed. He sat on the edge, and Beth immediately latched onto him, her arms wrapping around his waist with desperate strength. "I've got you," John said, awkward but certain. "You're safe." "He was drowning," Beth choked out. "Daddy was drowning and I couldn't help him. I tried to reach him but the water was too deep and he kept calling my name and it was just a dream. But it's real too." She looked up at him, face streaked with tears. "Isn't it? He's really gone." John couldn't lie to her. Not about this. "Yes." Beth's face crumpled, and she cried harder. John held her, uncertain and stiff, while she sobbed into his chest. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to make this better, so he just stayed. After a while, Beth's crying slowed. She hiccuped, wiping her face on his shirt. "Sorry," she whispered. "Don't apologize for grief," John said quietly. Cynthia said the same thing. "She's right." Beth was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you have nightmares?" "Sometimes." "About what?" John thought about Sarah. About the night they came to take her away. About standing in the empty apartment, 12 years old and suddenly alone, swearing he'd find her. About the years of searching, the false leads, the morgues he'd visited hoping and dreading in equal measure. "Someone I lost," he said. "Like I lost my daddy?" "Yes." Beth nodded against his chest. "Does it get easier?" "I don't know yet," John admitted. "Ask me in 20 years. Beth tilted her head back to look at him. "You've been sad for 20 years? The simplicity of it, the way she cut through all his defenses with a single question, nearly broke him. "Yes," he said. "That's too long to be sad." Beth's small hand patted his arm clumsily. "Maybe Cynthia's right. Maybe having people helps." John's throat tightened. "Maybe. Can I stay with you? Just for tonight?" Her voice was so small. "I don't want to be alone." Every instinct told John to say no. He didn't do this. Didn't let people into his space, his bed, his vulnerability. But Beth was looking at him with those huge, trusting eyes, and he couldn't find the words to refuse. "Okay," he said. Beth's face lit up with relief. She grabbed her worn teddy bear from the pillow and followed John down the hall to his room. It was the first time anyone had been in here besides him. The space was sparse. King bed, nightstand, closet. No photos, no personal items. Nothing that revealed who John Turner was when he wasn't being dangerous. Beth climbed onto the bed, settling against the pillows with her bear clutched to her chest. John lay on top of the covers, fully clothed, gun within reach on the nightstand. "Can you tell me a story?" Beth asked. "I don't know any stories. Make one up." John stared at the ceiling, searching for words. Finally, he said, "Once there was a man who built walls around himself. Big walls, so high no one could climb them." "Why?" "Because he was scared. Someone he loved got hurt, and he thought if he kept everyone out, it couldn't happen again." "Did it work?" "For a long time, yes. But then..." John paused. Then a little girl showed up, and she was so small she could walk right under the walls. And suddenly he realized that being safe and being alone were the same thing. "What did he do?" "I don't know yet," John said quietly. "The story's not finished." Beth yawned. "I think he should let her stay. Because everyone needs someone." "Yeah," John said. "Maybe he should." Within minutes, Beth was asleep, her breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of childhood. John lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, thinking about walls and promises, and the child who'd walked under them without even trying. The next morning, Cynthia arrived to find Beth helping John make breakfast, or more accurately, making a mess, while John tried to keep pancake batter from ending up on the floor. "Well," Cynthia said from the doorway, unable to hide her smile. "This is new." John shot her a look. She wanted pancakes. "I'm helping," Beth announced, flour dusting her nose. "I can see that." Cynthia set her bag on the counter. "How did you sleep?" Beth's smile faded. "I had a bad dream." "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." Beth flipped a pancake. It landed half on the spatula, half on the stove. "But Mr. John let me sleep in his room, and he told me a story about walls." Cynthia's eyebrows rose. She looked at John, who suddenly found the pancakes very interesting. "That was kind of him," Cynthia said carefully. After breakfast, while Beth played in the library, Cynthia pulled John aside. "She's attaching to you," she said quietly. "Fast. That's normal for kids who've lost a primary caregiver. They latch on to whoever makes them feel safe. But John, you need to be careful. If you're not planning to be permanent in her life, you need to set boundaries now, before she bonds completely." "What if I am planning to be permanent?" The words came out before John could stop them. Cynthia studied him. "Are you?" John thought about the past 8 days, about Beth reorganizing his library and making him sandwiches and crying into his chest about her father, about the way she looked at him like he was safe. "I don't know how to be a father," he said. "Most people don't. They learn." Cynthia's voice softened. "But you need to decide, because that little girl has already decided you're hers. If you walk away now, it'll destroy her." "I'm not walking away." "Then what are you doing?" John was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "When I was 12, my mother died. They came to take my sister away. I tried to stop them. I wasn't strong enough." He looked at Cynthia. "I swore I'd never let another child suffer if I could prevent it. Beth's father trusted me with her, so I'm keeping her safe." "That's protection," Cynthia said, "not parenthood." "What's the difference?" "Protection is a job. You do it because you have to. Parenthood is a choice. You do it because you want to." "I want her to be safe," John said. "That's not what I'm asking." Cynthia met his eyes. "Do you want her? Not the responsibility, not the mission, her. Do you want to be her father?" John opened his mouth, closed it. No one had ever asked him that so directly. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then figure it out," Cynthia said gently. "Because she's already starting to call you Mr. John like it's your name. And the way she looks at you." She shook her head. "That's how a daughter looks at her father." That afternoon, while Beth napped, Cynthia spread files across John's desk. "Rivera's been moving," she said. "My source, someone who still works in his organization, says he's putting pressure on everyone Marcus knew. Friends, neighbors, the woman who ran the daycare Beth went to. He's looking for her. He won't find her," John said. "Maybe not, but he's getting desperate." Cynthia pulled out a photo. "This is Carlo Mendez, Rivera's enforcer, the one who—" She swallowed hard. "The one who burned down my house." John studied the photo. Mendez was thick-necked, dead-eyed, the kind of man who hurt people and slept well. "He's been asking questions at the hospital," Cynthia continued, "about a man who brought in a little girl for a checkup. Paid cash. Didn't give a real name. Does he know it was me? Not yet, but it's only a matter of time." Cynthia's hands clenched. "When he finds out, Rivera will come for you. And for her. Let him." "John, you can't fight Rivera's entire organization alone." "I'm not alone." John looked at her. "I have you. I have Marco. I have 12 men I trust with my life. And I have something Rivera doesn't." "What's that?" "A reason to win that's stronger than money or power." John's voice hardened. "He's fighting to protect his empire. I'm fighting to protect a child. One of us will break first, and it won't be me." Cynthia was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, then we need a plan." They spent the next 2 hours mapping out Rivera's vulnerabilities. His legitimate businesses that couldn't afford scrutiny. His political connections who'd run if things got too hot. His supply chains that depended on secrecy. "If we hit him here, here, and here," Cynthia said, marking locations on a map, "we can cripple his cash flow. Force him to pull resources back. Give us breathing room. And then we go after him directly." She looked up. Using this. She pulled out a flash drive. What is it? John asked. Copies of everything in Beth's notebook, plus 3 years of my own research, enough to put Rivera away for life. Cynthia's smile was sharp. But not to the FBI, to his competitors, his allies, every organization that's ever done business with him. She leaned forward. We destroy his reputation, make everyone question if they can trust him. And once trust is gone in this world, he's dead. John took the flash drive. This is good work. I've had 3 years to think about it. Cynthia's voice went cold. I've imagined 1,000 ways to make him pay. This is the only one that doesn't end with me in prison. John slipped the drive into his pocket. When do we start? Tomorrow. She stood. I'll contact my source, set up a meeting. You focus on keeping Beth safe. Cynthia. John stopped her at the door. Thank you for this, for her. Don't thank me yet, she said quietly. We haven't won. We will. She looked back at him, and for the first time, John saw hope in her eyes instead of just grief. Yeah, she said. Maybe we will. That evening, John found Beth in his study. She was sitting in his chair. Her feet didn't touch the floor, carefully turning the pages of one of his books. What are you reading? He asked. She held it up. It was a leather-bound copy of The Art of War that he'd never actually read. It has pictures of armies, Beth said. Were you in the army? No. Then why do you have this? Someone gave it to me. They said I should read it. Did you? No, Beth giggled. You're bad at reading presents. John almost smiled. I am. She set the book down and spun in the chair. Cynthia says you're going to fight the bad men who hurt my daddy. John went still. She told you that? No, but I heard you talking. Beth stopped spinning. Are you scared? No. Why not? Because I've been doing this a long time, and I'm good at it. Beth considered this. Then she said, my daddy was scared all the time, but he did brave things anyway. He said that's what brave means. Doing it even when you're scared. Your daddy was right. Are you brave? John thought about the war that was coming, about Rivera and his men, and the violence that would follow, about the promise he'd made to keep this child safe. I'm trying to be, he said. Beth climbed down from the chair and walked over to him. She took his hand. I think you already are, she said, because you're keeping me safe even though it's dangerous. That's brave. John looked down at her, and something shifted in his chest. A wall crumbling. A door opening. Cynthia's question echoed. Do you want her? And for the first time, John had an answer. Yes. Beth, he said quietly, when this is over, when Rivera's gone and it's safe, would you want to stay here? With me? Beth's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Like, forever? If you want. Beth threw her arms around him, and this time, John didn't hesitate. He picked her up, holding her close, and felt the last of his walls come down. Yes, she said into his shoulder. Yes, yes, yes. John closed his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, he let himself hope. Maybe this time he wouldn't fail. Maybe this time he'd get to keep the child he swore to protect. Maybe this time the story would have a different ending. The attack came 6 days later, at 3:47 in the morning. John woke to the sound of breaking glass. He was out of bed in seconds, gun in hand, every sense sharp. The security alarm should have gone off. It didn't. Someone had cut the power. He moved down the hallway toward Beth's room, silent and fast. The door was open. The bed was empty. Panic, cold and vicious, flooded his veins. Then he heard it. Downstairs. Beth's voice, thin and terrified. "Let me go." John was down the stairs before his mind caught up to his body. The scene in the foyer made his blood freeze. 3 men. One holding Beth, hand clamped over her mouth. 2 others flanking him, guns drawn. And in the center, Carlo Mendez, Rivera's enforcer, smiling. "John Turner," Mendez said conversationally. "We need to talk." John's gun was up, aimed directly at Mendez's head. "Let her go." "Can't do that. The girl's our leverage." Beth struggled against her captor's grip, trying to bite his hand. The man tightened his hold, and she whimpered. John's finger moved to the trigger. "Last chance. You shoot me. My men shoot you. Then they shoot the girl." Mendez's smile widened. "And Mr. Rivera still gets what he wants. So let's be smart about this." "What does he want?" "The ledger Crawford gave her. The notebook." Mendez gestured to one of his men, who held up a tablet. On the screen, surveillance photos of Beth entering John's house. "We've been watching, waiting for the right moment, and here we are." John's mind raced through scenarios. 3 armed men, Beth in the kill zone, no backup. He'd sent half his security team home for the night, thinking the estate was impenetrable. He'd been wrong. "The notebook's in my safe," John lied. "Let her go, and I'll get it." "Nice try, but we both know you're not that stupid." Mendez tilted his head. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me the notebook. Then we're taking the girl. No deal. Then we kill her." Mendez's voice was flat, matter of fact. "Right here, right now. Your choice." Beth's eyes found John's across the room. She wasn't crying, wasn't screaming. She just looked at him with absolute trust, like she knew he wouldn't let them hurt her. That trust was going to get her killed. "Okay," John said, lowering his gun slowly. "Okay, I'll get the notebook." "Smart man." Mendez nodded to his men. "But if you try anything—" "I won't." John moved toward his study, mind racing. He needed a weapon, needed an advantage, needed— The sound of an engine roaring up the driveway cut through the silence. Mendez swore. "Who the hell is that?" Headlights flooded through the windows. A car door slammed. Then Cynthia's voice, sharp and commanding. "FBI, drop your weapons." It was a bluff. Cynthia wasn't FBI, didn't have backup. But Mendez didn't know that. For 3 critical seconds, the men holding Beth hesitated. John didn't. He fired. The man holding Beth went down, clean headshot. Before his body hit the floor, John had pivoted and taken out the second man. Mendez dove for cover, returning fire. Bullets shattered the chandelier, the mirror, the antique table John had never liked anyway. "Beth, run!" John shouted. She did. Straight to him. He grabbed her, shielding her with his body as he fired twice more at Mendez. One shot went wide. One caught Mendez in the shoulder, spinning him around. Then Cynthia was in the doorway, holding a gun John hadn't known she owned, her face pale but determined. "It's over," she said. Mendez looked at her. At John. At the 2 dead men on the floor. He laughed, a wet, pained sound. "You think this changes anything? Rivera's got a dozen more where we came from. He'll send them all." Blood seeped through his fingers where he clutched his shoulder. "You can't protect her forever, Turner." "Watch me," John said, and fired. Mendez dropped. The silence that followed was deafening. Beth was shaking against John's chest, her hands fisted in his shirt. Cynthia stood frozen in the doorway, gun still raised, staring at the bodies. "I heard the alarm cut out," she said numbly. "I was driving by. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to check on Beth, and I saw the power go down. I didn't know what else to do, so I—" She trailed off. "You saved her life," John said quietly. I killed someone. Cynthia's hand started to shake. I've spent my whole career saving lives, and You protected a child. John's voice was firm. That's all that matters. Cynthia nodded, but she looked like she was about to be sick. John lifted Beth into his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in his neck. Is it over? She whispered. No, John said, because he wouldn't lie to her. But we're okay. You're safe. I was so scared. I know. You were so brave. I thought they were going to take me. Never, John said fiercely. Never, Beth. I will burn this city down before I let anyone take you. He meant it. Every word. John called Marco at 4:15 a.m. I need a cleanup crew, he said. 3 bodies. My house. Now. Jesus, John, what happened? Rivera sent Mendez. Marco swore in Italian. Is the girl... She's fine. Shaken, but fine. And you? Also fine. John looked at Cynthia, who was sitting on the stairs with her head between her knees, breathing slowly. Cynthia Ramos was here. She helped. The nurse? Yes. John, Rivera's going to retaliate. Hard. You killed his enforcer. That's a declaration of war. Good, John said coldly. I'm done playing defense. It's time to end this. He hung up and knelt beside Cynthia. Hey, he said gently. Look at me. She raised her head. Her eyes were red. I killed him, she whispered. You saved Beth. Both things can be true. Her voice cracked. I've spent 3 years wanting Rivera dead, wanting everyone connected to him dead. And now She looked at her hands. I thought it would feel like justice. It just feels empty. That's because you're not a killer, John said. You're a mother who protected a child. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. He took her hands, grounding her. You did what you had to do. You can regret it. You can grieve it. But you can't undo it. And you can't carry, guilt for protecting someone who couldn't protect herself. Cynthia's tears spilled over. This was supposed to make me feel better. Supposed to make Sophia's death mean something. It does mean something, John said. You saved Beth's life. Sophia would be proud of that. You think so? I know so. Cynthia nodded shakily and wiped her eyes. What now? Now we finish this. John stood, pulling her up with him. Rivera won't stop. Not after tonight. So we take the fight to him. How? We use what Beth's father gave us. John pulled out the flash drive Cynthia had given him. We destroy him. Completely. The cleanup crew arrived 20 minutes later. By dawn, there was no evidence that anything had happened. The bodies were gone. The blood was scrubbed away. The bullet holes were patched. But Beth remembered. John could see it in her eyes as she sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Cynthia sat beside her, one hand on her shoulder. Beth, honey, can you talk to me? Beth blinked. They were going to take me. I know. And Mr. John stopped them. Yes. People died. Beth looked at Cynthia. Is that my fault? No, Cynthia said firmly. Absolutely not. Those men made their choices. They came here to hurt you. What happened after that is on them, not you. But, no buts. Cynthia knelt down, taking both of Beth's hands. You are not responsible for other people's violence. You are not responsible for your father's choices. You are not responsible for any of this. Beth's chin trembled. I'm scared. That's okay. Being scared is normal. I don't want to be scared anymore. Cynthia pulled her into a hug. I know, sweetheart. I know. John watched them, something tight in his chest. Beth had almost been taken, almost been hurt. Because he'd let his guard down, because he'd thought his walls were enough. They weren't. He made a decision. Cynthia, he said quietly. Take her upstairs. Stay with her. Cynthia looked up. What are you going to do? End this. John, I'm not waiting for Rivera to send more men. I'm not waiting for him to find another way in. John's voice was cold, controlled. I'm going to make sure he never threatens her again. How? John held up the flash drive. By destroying everything he's built, and then destroying him. It took 6 hours. Marco distributed the contents of the flash drive to every major player in the Northeast. Rival families, police commissioners on the take, politicians, who'd been bankrolled by Rivera for years. The media. By noon, Rivera's empire was imploding. His legitimate businesses were raided. His shell corporations were frozen. His allies were scrambling to distance themselves. And most importantly, his competitors smelled blood. John watched it unfold from his study, tracking news reports and phone calls from Marco's network. Rivera's name was being dragged through every outlet. Evidence of money laundering, bribery, extortion. The kind of exposure that didn't just end a career, it ended a life. He's finished, Marco said over the phone. Every family in the Northeast is cutting ties. He's got no protection left. Where is he? Holed up in his penthouse, surrounded by what's left of his security team. Marco paused. He knows it was you, John. He's calling everyone, trying to buy his way out, offering deals. Let him. What are you going to do? Nothing. John's voice was quiet. I'm going to let his own people tear him apart. And if they don't, they will. Men like Rivera don't inspire loyalty. They inspire fear. And when fear stops working, John trailed off. They have nothing. The call came at 6 p.m. Unknown number. John answered. Turner. Rivera's voice was hoarse, desperate. We need to talk. No, we don't. You destroyed me. Fine. You win. Just leave the girl alone. She's a kid. She doesn't deserve... You sent 3 men into my home to take her, John said, his voice ice. You held a gun to her head. You terrorized a child. I was protecting my business. You were protecting yourself. John's grip tightened on the phone. And now there's nothing left to protect. Please. Rivera's voice cracked. I have money. Offshore accounts you didn't find. I can disappear. Just let me live. You should have thought about that before you threatened her. Turner. John hung up. 2 hours later, Marco called. It's done. Rivera's people turned on him. He's dead. John felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just the cold certainty that Beth was safe. Good, he said. He found Beth in the library, sitting with Cynthia. They were reading a book together, something with bright illustrations that made Beth smile. When she saw John, she jumped up and ran to him. Is it over? She asked. Yes, John said, picking her up. It's over. You're safe now. Beth wrapped her arms around his neck. Promise? I promise. She held him tighter, and John realized she was crying. Not from fear, from relief. You kept me safe, she whispered. Just like Daddy said you would. John's throat tightened. Always, he said. I'll always keep you safe. And for the first time since this started, he believed it. The weeks after Rivera's death were strange. The city felt different, quieter, like it was holding its breath. Rivera's empire had collapsed spectacularly, leaving a power vacuum that other families were scrambling to fill. John stayed out of it. He'd made his statement. Now he just wanted peace. But peace, he was learning, wasn't the same as healing. Beth still had nightmares. Less frequent now, but when they came, they were vicious. She'd wake up screaming, convinced men were in her room, convinced she was back at that rest stop, waiting for a father who would never come. John stayed with her every time. Sometimes he'd sit on the edge of her bed until she fell back asleep. Sometimes she'd crawl into his room and curl up beside him, small and shaking. He never turned her away. Cynthia came by 3 times a week, and slowly, carefully, Beth started to talk about what had happened, about her father, about the men who'd broken into the house, about being scared. Trauma doesn't just disappear, Cynthia told John one afternoon while Beth napped. It takes time and patience, and sometimes years later something will trigger it, and she'll be right back in that moment. So, she'll never be okay? John's voice was tight. I didn't say that. Cynthia's tone was gentle. I said it takes time. She's resilient, John. She's already come so far. But you need to be realistic about what recovery looks like. John nodded, but the truth was, he didn't know how to be realistic about this. He knew how to eliminate threats, how to protect, how to control his environment so nothing unexpected could touch him. He didn't know how to help a child heal from something he couldn't fix with money or violence. You're doing better than you think, Cynthia said, reading his face. You're showing up. You're consistent. You're letting her be a kid. She smiled. That's more than a lot of parents do. I'm not her parent, John said automatically. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. Really? Because she calls you Dad now, when she thinks you're not listening. John's breath caught. What? This morning, she was drawing a picture. I asked what it was, and she said, my new family. That's me, that's Cynthia, and that's my dad. Cynthia's smile softened. She pointed to a stick figure in a black suit. John was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to be a father. Neither did most fathers when they started. But you're learning. Cynthia stood. The question is, do you want to be, officially? What do you mean? I mean adoption, John. Legal guardianship. Making it permanent. She met his eyes. Because right now you're in limbo. You're taking care of her, but you don't have any legal rights. If social services found out she was here, they could take her. Put her in the system. John's hands clenched. No. Then make it official. File for adoption. It won't be easy. Your background. Your profession. But Marco said he could pull strings. Get it pushed through. And if they say no? Then we fight, Cynthia said simply. But John, you need to decide. Is Beth your daughter? Or is she just someone you're protecting? John thought about the past month. About teaching Beth how to make breakfast. About reading her terrible children's books every night. About the way she'd started leaving her backpack in the hallway instead of clutching it everywhere, like she finally believed this place was home. She's my daughter, he said quietly. Cynthia's smile was radiant. Then let's make it official. The adoption process was, as predicted, a nightmare. Marco pulled every string he had, paid off judges, buried John's criminal record under layers of shell corporations and false paper trails, created a narrative of a wealthy businessman taking in an orphaned child out of the goodness of his heart. It took 3 months. 3 months of interviews, home visits, background checks. 3 months of John learning to smile politely at social workers who looked at his house with thinly veiled suspicion. But through it all, Beth never doubted. They're going to say yes, she told him one night, curled up on the couch beside him. I know they will. How do you know? Because you're my dad, and that's real. The paper just makes it official. John's throat tightened. Beth, if they say no, they won't. She looked up at him with absolute certainty. And even if they do, you're still my dad. Nothing changes that. She was right. 6 weeks later, the call came. The adoption was approved. John stood in his study, phone in hand, staring out the window. He should feel something. Relief, joy, triumph. Instead, he felt terrified. Because now it was real. Now he was responsible for another human being. Now, if he failed, it wouldn't just be him paying the price. He found Beth in the library, organizing his books for the third time. "Beth," he said quietly. She turned, and something in his expression made her smile. "They said yes, didn't they?" "Yes." She squealed and launched herself at him. John caught her, holding her tight, and for the first time in 30 years, he let himself cry. "You're stuck with me now," Beth said into his shoulder. "I know," John said, his voice rough. "I'm counting on it." Cynthia insisted on celebrating. She showed up the next day with balloons, a cake that said family in bright pink frosting, and a grin that hadn't left her face in hours. "This is excessive," John said, eyeing the decorations she'd strung across his kitchen. "Shut up and let me be happy," Cynthia retorted. "You're a father now. That's worth celebrating." Beth was in the living room, trying to blow up balloons and mostly just making herself dizzy. John watched her through the doorway, still half convinced this was a dream he'd wake up from. "You're allowed to be happy too, you know," Cynthia said quietly. "I am happy. You look terrified." "I'm that too." Cynthia laughed. "Welcome to parenthood." They had cake. Beth got frosting on her nose and smeared it on John's shirt when she hugged him. Cynthia took photos on her phone, claiming she needed evidence of this miracle. It was messy and loud and chaotic. It was perfect. That night, after Cynthia left and Beth was asleep, John stood in her doorway, watching her. She'd fallen asleep with a book on her chest, some story about dragons that she'd made him read 3 times. A daughter. He had a daughter. 20 years ago, he'd failed to protect Sarah. Had watched them take her away, screaming. Had spent 2 decades searching for her, finding nothing. But now, he had Beth. And he would die before he let anything take her from him. "I won't fail you," he whispered into the darkness. "I promise." 2 weeks later, Beth came home from school with a assignment. "We have to draw our family tree," she announced, spreading paper and crayons across the kitchen table. "Can you help?" John sat down beside her, uncertain. "What do you need?" "Well, here's me." She drew a small stick figure. "And here's you." A taller stick figure in black. "And here's Cynthia." Another figure, this one with a bright smile. "Cynthia's not family," John said carefully. Beth looked at him like he was being ridiculous. "Yes, she is. She loves me. That makes her family." John didn't argue. Beth drew for a while in silence. Then she added another figure at the top of the page. "That's my first dad," she said quietly. "Marcus. He's gone, but he's still part of my family, because he gave me to you." She looked up. "Is that okay?" John's chest tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart. That's okay." Beth smiled and kept drawing. When she was done, she held up the paper proudly. It was a mess of colors and crooked lines, but in the center, very clearly, was a family. Not perfect. Not traditional. But real. "Can we hang it on the fridge?" Beth asked. "Yeah," John said, his voice rough. "We can hang it on the fridge." And that night, when John passed by the kitchen, he stopped to look at the drawing. At the little girl in the center, surrounded by people who loved her. At the man in black, labeled in shaky handwriting, Dad. And for the first time in 20 years, John Turner let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to be happy. Spring came, slowly to Boston that year. The snow melted in uneven patches across the estate grounds, revealing dormant grass and the garden John hadn't touched in a decade. Beth stood at the kitchen window, watching robins hopping across the lawn, and said, "Can we plant flowers?" John looked up from his coffee. "Flowers?" Cynthia said gardens are good for healing. She said watching things grow helps. Beth turned to him. "Can we try?" "I don't know anything about gardening." "Me neither. We can learn together." So they did. They spent weekends at the garden center, Beth carefully selecting packets of seeds while John pushed the cart and tried to understand the difference between annuals and perennials. They dug in the dirt, planted seeds that probably weren't spaced correctly, and waited. "What if nothing grows?" Beth asked one afternoon, mud streaked across her face. "Then we try again," John said, "until something does." 3 weeks later, the first shoots appeared. Beth squealed and dragged John outside to see them, tiny green threads pushing through the soil. "We did it," she breathed. "They're alive." John looked at her. This child who'd been abandoned in the snow, who'd lost her father, who'd survived violence and fear, now kneeling in the dirt, marveling at new life. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We did." Cynthia became a permanent fixture in their lives. She came for dinner twice a week, helped Beth with homework, taught John how to braid hair, poorly, but he tried. On the eye. Weekends, they'd all go to the park, or the museum, or sometimes just drive with no destination in mind. One Saturday, they ended up at the beach. It was still too cold to swim, but Beth ran along the shore collecting shells while John and Cynthia sat on a blanket watching her. "She's different," Cynthia said, "from when I first met her." "How?" "Lighter, less afraid." Cynthia smiled. "She laughs now. Real laughs, not just polite ones." John watched Beth chase a seagull, shrieking with delight, when it flew away. "You did that," Cynthia said. "We did that," John corrected. "You, me, Marco, everyone who helped. But mostly you." Cynthia looked at him. "You gave her a home, gave her safety, gave her a father." John was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I gave her what I never had, what Sarah never had." "Have you looked for Sarah recently?" "No." John's hands clenched. "I spent 20 years searching. Every database, every contact, every possible lead. Nothing. She's either dead, or she doesn't want to be found. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made peace with it." He looked at Beth. "I can't change the past, but I can choose the future. And Beth is that future?" "Yeah," John said. "She is." In May, Beth's school had a father-daughter dance. She brought home the flyer with barely contained excitement. "Can we go? Please?" John looked at the bright pink paper advertising "A Night of Dancing and Memories" and felt his stomach drop. "I don't dance," he said. "You don't have to be. Good. You just have to be there." Beth's eyes were huge. "Please, Dad. Dad." She'd started calling him that a month ago, casually, like it had always been his name. He'd never corrected her. "Okay," John said. "We'll go." Beth threw her arms around him. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." The night of the dance, John stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. He'd worn suits worth thousands of dollars to meetings with dangerous men, and never felt nervous. This, a school, dance in a gymnasium, terrified him. Beth appeared in the doorway, wearing the dress Cynthia had helped her pick out. It was blue with flowers on it, and she'd insisted on wearing her sneakers underneath because fancy shoes hurt. "You look beautiful," John said. "You look nervous," Beth said. "I am nervous." "Why?" "Because I've never done this before." Beth walked over and took his hand. "Me neither. We'll figure it out together." The dance was exactly as chaotic as John expected. The gym was decorated with streamers and balloons. A DJ played music too loud. Little girls in dresses ran everywhere while fathers stood awkwardly on the sidelines. But then Beth pulled him onto the dance floor, and none of it mattered. They swayed to a song John didn't know. Beth stood on his shoes so she could reach, her small hands in his, her face bright with joy. "This is the best night ever," she said. "Even though I'm a terrible dancer." "Especially because you're a terrible dancer." She giggled. "But you're here. That's what matters." John looked around the gym, at all the other fathers dancing with their daughters, at the families taking photos, at the ordinary, beautiful normalcy of it all. A year ago, he'd been alone in a house too big for one person, building walls to keep the world out. Now he was here, dancing badly to pop music in a school gym, with his daughter. "Thank you," he said quietly. Beth looked up. "For what?" "For asking me to be your dad." Beth's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't ask. You just are." "Yeah," John said, his own throat tight. "I am." The song ended. Beth hugged him, and John held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, because she was. In June, Cynthia took them to visit Sophia's grave. It was the first time she'd gone back since the funeral. John drove. Beth sat in the back, and Cynthia stared out the window, silent and tense. The cemetery was quiet. Cynthia led them to a small headstone with Sophia's name and dates. She'd only lived 6 years. Cynthia knelt, placing fresh flowers by the stone. Her hands shook. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took so long to visit. I couldn't face you. Couldn't face what I'd lost." Beth stepped forward and placed her hand on Cynthia's shoulder. "But I'm here now," Cynthia continued, her voice breaking. "And I want you to meet someone. This is Beth. She's 8, and she's alive because I didn't let what happened to you happen to her." Tears streamed down her face. "I couldn't save you, Sophia, but I saved her. And I hope that makes you proud." Beth knelt beside Cynthia and carefully placed a drawing on the grave, one of her family trees with an extra figure added at the top. "That's Sophia," Beth said quietly. "Cynthia told me about her. I wanted her to be part of our family too." Cynthia broke. She pulled Beth into her arms, sobbing, and John stood a few feet back, giving them space. He thought about Sarah, about the sister he'd lost, about the daughter he'd found, about how grief and love were two sides of the same coin. When Cynthia finally stood, her face was blotchy but calm. "Thank you," she said to both of them, "for being here, for letting me—" "We're family," Beth said simply. "That's what families do." Cynthia smiled through her tears. "Yeah, we are." In August, John made a decision. The house had too many ghosts, too many empty rooms, too much space for one father and one daughter. So he sold it. They found a smaller place in the suburbs, a normal house on a normal street with neighbors who waved, and a yard just big enough for Beth's expanding garden. On moving day, Beth stood in the foyer of the old estate, looking around one last time. "Are you sad to leave?" John asked. "A little," she admitted. "This is where I became your daughter, where we became a family." She looked up at him. "But home isn't the house, right? It's the people." "Right," John said. "Then I'm bringing home with me." She took his hand. "Let's go." The new house was chaotic for weeks. Boxes everywhere, furniture in the wrong rooms, Beth's drawings taped to walls that hadn't been painted yet. But it felt lived in. Warm. Real. Cynthia came over the first night with pizza and wine. They sat on the floor of the living room, eating off paper plates because the dishes were still packed. To new beginnings, Cynthia said, raising her glass. To family, John added. To being brave, Beth said, holding up her juice box. They clinked glasses and ate pizza and laughed when Beth got sauce on the carpet. And John realized this was it. This was what he'd been searching for without knowing it. Not power, not control, not walls high enough to keep the world out. Just this. Just home. 1 year later, the garden was thriving. Roses bloomed along the fence. Tomatoes hung heavy on their vines. Beth's sunflowers had grown taller than her, and she was furiously proud. She was 9 now. Taller, more confident. Still prone to nightmares, but less often. She'd made friends at school, joined the art club, started talking about what she wanted to be when she grew up. John sat on the porch watching her water her plants, and Cynthia settled into the chair beside him. "How are you?" she asked. "Good," John said, and he meant it. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He looked at her. "Thank you for everything, for helping her, for helping me." "You're welcome." Cynthia smiled. "But you did the hard part." "What's that?" "You let yourself love her." John thought about that. About the night at the rest stop. About the promise he'd made. About every moment since. "It wasn't hard," he said quietly. "It was the easiest thing I ever did." Beth ran up to the porch holding a tomato. "Look, the first one." John took it, turning it over in his hands. "You grew this." "We grew this," Beth corrected. "Together." She was right. Everything they had, the house, the garden, the family, they'd grown together. Beth sat on the steps, leaning against John's leg. Cynthia reached over and squeezed his hand, and for the first time in his entire life, John Turner felt complete. He thought about Marcus Crawford lying in the snow at a rest stop, trusting a stranger to save his daughter. "Thank you," John thought, "for trusting me, for giving me a second chance." Because that's what Beth had been. Not just a child to protect, a second chance. A chance to be the man he'd always wanted to be. A father. Redemption isn't always loud. Sometimes it doesn't come with grand gestures or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it comes in the quiet moments, in gardens planted together, in terrible dancing at school functions, in choosing to be brave when every instinct screams to run. John Turner spent 20 years building walls to keep the world out, to keep himself safe from the pain of losing someone again. But an 8-year-old girl walked right under those walls and taught him the truth. Safety isn't about keeping people out. It's about letting the right people in. And love, real, lasting love, isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and showing up anyway, every single day. Beth lost her father. Cynthia lost her daughter. John lost his sister. But they found each other, and they built something new from the ashes of everything they'd lost. A family. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. And that was enough. If this story touched you, if it made you believe that even in our darkest moments we can find light, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us what resonated. Tell us your own stories of second chances. Tell us where you're watching from.